In the software world, we're always talking about speeding up the rate that you deliver your software, ship your software, accelerating application delivery. What does this mean and why are we on and on about it? There's at least 3 reasons. The ones that I care about. One is just purely what it says, getting your software out the door faster. I think it's been over 10 years since that whole software eating the world thing came out. And the point of that still stands. Most organizations, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, depend on software to run their business. If they didn't have software, their own software, their business wouldn't run as well at all. Think of the insurance companies you interact with, what militaries do, how you interact with governments, or often don't, through software. Just your day-to-day life with companies that aren't these big high-flying tech companies. They all depend on software to have not only good customer experience, but if you look at all of the internal-facing software, how, to use my favorite example, I guess, insurance brokers approve insurance. How if you get in a car wreck, the claims adjuster goes out and uses custom-written software to make that experience good. If you're taking 6, 12, even maybe 3 months to get the software out, you're just not shipping. Meanwhile, your competitors are. We used to do a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt FUD as vendors to really drive people to this, but it's actually a reality nowadays. And it was back then. Software is an incredibly important thing, and the speed at which you can release your software is the speed at which you can not only innovate and put in place new businesses, but I would argue the speed at which you can conduct business. So it helps basic business finances. I think it's a good idea to at least be able to ship your software monthly. Weekly would be great. You could do multiple times a day, but I suspect for most enterprises, it doesn't really matter. There's probably diminishing rates of returns. If you think about how you renew your prescription drugs at the pharmacy or chemist, for my friends over here, really, if they're updating the features in their software daily, probably doesn't matter at all. Or maybe it does. I don't know. But shoot for monthly. I think that's reasonable. Now, the second reason, which is closely connected, is that if you can ship your software frequently, weekly, monthly, you can start to actually use real-world data to validate your strategy. You can use data-validated product management. So you can come up with an idea of the best way to implement a feature. You can deploy it on that weekly or monthly basis, and you can observe if it's actually solving your customers' or your employees' needs. You can see if that feature is working as you wanted it to. Now, you hear a lot of stories about how people optimize workflow processes, which is a huge amount of what goes on in enterprises. You can go back to that pharmacy example and think about what are the theories we have about the best way to make it easy for people to renew their prescriptions in a optimized, which is to say, as cheap as way possible for our pharmacists, again, or chemists. And you can see that there's all sorts of ways you could think about implementing that software, filling out forms, tapping buttons, all sorts of stuff. And you might have theories about what works and doesn't. And if you can release your software monthly, if not weekly, you can start to come up with tests, with hypotheses, and you can observe what actually happens. And you can see how you have that feedback cycle and you change what the software does to improve it. Companies like Booking.com are renowned for doing thousands of these kind of experiments all the time. They must automate it with robots. I don't know how people could look over it. There's a great example that I used to give about the IRS, the tax collectors of the United States, how they improve their software through this iterative thing. And I'll put a link down below if you want to go relive the memories of my great anecdotes. Again, if you have a good connection between the software, how your business runs, how you innovate your business and change the strategy, you can see that if you can experiment with your software, you can start to experiment with your business and you can start to expand the way it functions and not only try out new things, but really iterate over and perfect and try out over and over again different ways of doing new things until you land on what's successful for you. Now, the third reason that it's good to accelerate your application delivery, deploy your software more frequently, is under a huge bucket that I would call quality. What I mean by quality are things, I think we used to call them non-functional requirements. I don't know, I just make slides nowadays. I haven't kept up with the C2 wiki in a long time. But what I mean by this are things that are not the features in your software. Things like the quality. Are there bugs in your software? The performance of it in production. Does it scale up to meet whatever needs you have, whether that's a high amount of people or doing very intensive transactional work? Is it secure? Come on, it's got to be secure. I don't think anyone's ever said of their software, I don't need it to be secure. But when things become insecure, when there are patches you need to do, when you have found an error, whenever some security incident comes up, if you can release your software frequently, then you can patch those things and change them. This is where the ability to deploy multiple times a day becomes incredibly important. We used to talk about this notion of repaving, which is that if you can blow away all of production, that is, you completely replace what's in production, completely replace your applications, to the known state with the patches applied to it, you get the chance to remove any malware, anything that was installed that you don't want. And you also get the chance, of course, to deploy patches and fixes. And that ability to go through the complete software cycle, the complete application delivery cycle, multiple times a day becomes incredibly valuable for security people when they want to deploy a patch as soon as possible. Hopefully not multiple times a day, but as needed. You can start to set up this kind of rotation in the security area that people like Wells Fargo has talked about, where they're rebuilding production every week. So think about it. They're getting that fresh state of production for them. It's almost like multiple times a day if you went around your house and you made sure all the doors were locked and it was secure. Instead of relying on whatever it is you did that morning before you had enough coffee or kind of sugar in your system, whether it's milkshakes or coffee, whatever job to be done you're pursuing before you leave the door. There's another aspect of quality that's important, and that's regulations, governance, compliance. That is, you want to make sure that you have not only built the software, but that you're running the software and that you have accounted for following the rules, the laws, the regulations as needed. This ability to get software out the door frequently drives two things for, let's call it, compliance and governance. One, it has that security aspect for you. If you find that you've done something wrong, if your auditors have told you that you need to redo something because you didn't document the process doing well, or you didn't follow the process. Again, just as you could go back with a feature and change it and redeploy it on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, you're able to go through and redo that compliance thing and prove to your auditors that you've done something. What was the other reason? The second reason why accelerating application delivery, deploying your software to production faster, is great for governance is because in order to do that, you need to have pretty much a fully automated pipeline, a continuous integration, continuous delivery. You can call it a secure software supply chain, a value stream, whatever. All the activities that it takes to go from an idea to coding, to staging, to QAing, all the way to finally moving the pixels on the screen, having the application ready for a person to use. When you do all of that, the sheer amount of automation that you're doing throws off all sorts of information that your auditors can use to actually verify not only that someone has said they followed the right processes, but that they have actually followed the right processes. All of that automation, if you take the time as an auditor to understand and trust what's going on, and also as the developers and operations team, I don't know, you could call them platform engineers or DevOps people. If you're watching this in a few years, insert whatever phrase we call them in the future. I hope things are great. I'm looking forward to the future. I've been making lots of plans. And so, hopefully it's worked out well. But those people, they can do some work with the auditors to do what you could call scripting, but to basically say, hey, auditors, tell me all the stuff that you need to make sure and go through that we are compliant so that you can do an audit. Now, typically people gather this stuff, and I'm not really kidding here. The tool that they use is something called Microsoft Office, which means they schedule a lot of meetings to talk with developers. They fill out a lot of Excel spreadsheets. They use a lot of Outlook, a lot of email, and it's a very manual, patchy process that they go through. In the same way that we can automate most of that pipeline for getting software out the door, you can automate an incredible amount of what auditors are doing for compliance. So those are the most important three reasons that I think it's important. Junebug. No one cares. So those are the most important reasons that I think it's good to focus on getting software out the door faster, speeding up that pipeline, accelerating application delivery. Now, if you're interested in that, I don't know. We got a lot going on at VMware Tanzu. I've worked here for almost 10 years, and I can tell you that we've been working on that across multiple platforms. We have a whole methodology in Pivotal Labs, now called Tanzu Labs, that really changes your process over to doing that. We've got two great platforms, the Tanzu Application Service, that is just a complete, if you'll pardon the phrase, turnkey way of running on pretty much any infrastructure that immediately gets you set up doing this. And if you want to do that on top of Kubernetes, no matter what type of infrastructure it runs on, we also have the Tanzu application platform that's basically recreating that same platform as a service experience on top of Kubernetes, plus a whole lot more stuff that helps that whole pipeline, the developers all the way to the auditors, really collaborate and work with each other, all based on lots of open source projects that are tightly integrated together. You can find out more about that by going to tanzu.vmware.com.